Evenings were particularly special. They would sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories or playing small games. He observed how the child had changed, more confident, more open, more joyful, and he reflected on his own transformation. He had learned patience, empathy, courage, and the joy of nurturing another life. The apartment, once empty and quiet, now resonated with laughter, curiosity, and the warmth of companionship. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the small balcony, the child leaned against him and asked quietly, "Do you think we will always be together?" He smiled, gently holding the child's hand, and replied, "Yes, we'll face life together, and we'll make sure we always have each other." The simplicity of the statement, combined with the weight of their shared journey, captured the essence of their bond. It was not just about survival or routines or legalities. It was about trust, love, and the commitment to be present for each other through uncertainty and hope. They continued to grow together. Challenges arose, as they always do, but the foundation they had built allowed them to face difficulties with confidence and care. School projects, friendships, and small community interactions enriched their lives. The child's personality flourished, blending resilience with curiosity and joy, while he discovered the profound satisfaction of caring, guiding, and loving without hesitation. The apartment became more than a home. It became a symbol of hope, safety, and connection. Each room held memories of shared meals, stories, laughter, and quiet reflections. The walls echoed with growth, understanding, and the simple but profound power of human connection. They had weathered fear, uncertainty, and challenge, and emerged with a life that, while not perfect, was filled with meaning, love, and possibility. As night fell, he watched the child sleep peacefully, toy clutched in small hands, blankets arranged with care. He reflected on the journey, the chance encounter that had altered both their lives, the small victories, the challenges overcome, and the growth achieved. He understood that life was unpredictable, sometimes difficult, but that love, patience, and trust could transform even the most uncertain circumstances into a life of stability and hope in the quiet. He allowed himself a moment of gratitude. The child's presence had reshaped his world, bringing purpose, joy, and a sense of fulfillment he had long thought impossible. Together, they had built a home, a family, and a life filled with possibility. Each day was a continuation of that journey, and though challenges would come, he knew they would meet them, as they always had, together, with trust, care, and the unspoken promise of enduring love. He woke up to the sound of his alarm clock buzzing across the small bedroom. The room was plain, with white walls that had begun to yellow slightly with age, and a single window that let in just enough morning light to show the dust on the floor. He rubbed his eyes and took a deep breath. Another day, he thought. Another day to get through. He got dressed quickly, pulling on a plain shirt and worn jeans. There was no time for breakfast. He had 2 jobs to juggle, bills to pay, and a small apartment to maintain. He quietly stepped into the kitchen, which smelled faintly of last night's dinner. The small fridge had just enough food for a simple meal: a few eggs, a half loaf of bread, and some leftover vegetables. He poured himself a cup of coffee, black, bitter, but enough to wake him up. Sitting down, he stared out of the window for a moment, looking at the street below. It was quiet, almost empty. He felt the weight of the silence pressing on him. He had been alone for years, not by choice, but by circumstance. A few failed relationships and a series of disappointments had left him wary of opening his heart to anyone else. Friends were few and far between. Family was distant, and the thought of starting over with someone new seemed impossible. And children, he thought, were a responsibility he could not even imagine. He had never wanted them, not really, because he was afraid he wouldn't be able to give them the life they deserved. By 7 o'clock, he was out the door, locking the apartment behind him. The walk to the bus stop was familiar, each step etched into his memory from years of repetition. The streets were still damp from last night's rain, and he could smell the wet earth mixed with the faint scent of car exhaust. The city was waking up slowly, the first sounds of traffic and people talking drifting up from the street corners. At his first job, he moved quickly, keeping his head down and focusing on the tasks at hand. He worked in a small office, doing paperwork that required little thought but constant attention. His coworkers greeted him politely but never lingered. He didn't mind. Conversation required energy he didn't have, and small talk felt like a luxury he could not afford. He finished the morning tasks efficiently, moving from one to another, and glanced at the clock. Time was already moving faster than he felt it should. During his lunch break, he sat alone on a bench outside the building, eating the sandwich he had packed the night before. It was simple: a slice of bread, some cheese, a little leftover meat from dinner. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, not because it was good, but because he had learned to appreciate the little things in life. Around him, people passed by laughing and talking in groups. He watched them quietly, feeling a sense of distance he could not explain. They seemed so light, so free. He wondered what it would feel like to belong somewhere, to have someone waiting for him at home who needed him in ways that were meaningful. The afternoon at work passed quickly, filled with the sound of typing, phones ringing, and occasional conversations between colleagues. He kept busy, losing himself in the rhythm of work. By the time the clock signaled the end of the day, he felt exhausted, but there was still no rest for him. He had a second job waiting. The evening was a blur of activity. He changed his shirt, grabbed a small bag with the essentials for his second job, and headed out again. This job was physical, demanding strength and stamina. He spent hours lifting boxes, moving equipment, and helping clients with deliveries. Sweat dripped down his face, and his muscles ached, but he did not complain. There was a quiet pride in his ability to keep going, to push through the exhaustion. Even when every part of him wanted to stop, by the time he returned to his apartment, night had fallen. The streets were dimly lit by street lamps, and the city had taken on a slower, more reflective pace. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, grateful for the small sense of safety his home provided. He poured himself a glass of water, ate a small portion of leftover dinner, and sank into the couch. The silence was heavy, but tonight it felt different, more empty than usual. He missed the sound of laughter, the warmth of another presence, but he quickly pushed the thought away. He had responsibilities. Feelings like that were a distraction he could not afford. After a quick shower, he sat by the window, looking out at the darkened streets. The rain from earlier had left puddles that reflected the dim glow of the streetlights. He thought about the day, the monotony, and the quiet moments of fleeting satisfaction. He thought about how life had become a series of routines, each day blending into the next. He felt a strange emptiness but could not name it. It was a longing for something he did not yet know. As he prepared for bed, he heard a faint sound outside, a soft, almost inaudible whimper. He paused, listening carefully. The sound came again, this time a little louder. His heart rate quickened. He opened the window slightly, peering into the darkness. At first he saw nothing. Then, a small figure emerged from the shadows, sitting on the steps of the building across from his window. It was a child no older than 7 or 8, shivering and hunched over, holding what looked like a small, worn-out bag. The sight struck him with a mix of shock and concern. Who was this child, and why were they here, alone and hungry? He hurried down the stairs, not knowing what he would do. The child looked up as he approached, eyes wide and wary. Are you going to help me?" the child asked, voice trembling. The dad froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. He had never cared for a child before, never faced the responsibility of someone so small and vulnerable. But the look in the child's eyes was enough to break through the walls he had built around himself. He knelt down, trying to appear calm and reassuring. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now," he said softly. The child hesitated, then took a tentative step toward him. He noticed the thinness, the dirt on their clothes, and the hunger that seemed to emanate from every movement. He felt a pang of something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Compassion mixed with fear. A desire to help clashing with the reality of what it would mean. He led the child inside, offering a warm blanket and a place to sit. He went to the kitchen and started preparing something simple. Bread, some cheese, and water. The child watched silently, not saying much, but clearly grateful. As they ate, he asked gently, "What's your name?" The child whispered it, barely audible. He nodded, remembering the importance of names, of being recognized, of being seen after the meal. They sat together in the small living room, the child leaning slightly against him. He felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life. This was not something he had planned, not something he had expected, but it felt right. For the first time in a long time, he thought that maybe life had something more to offer than routine and loneliness. He looked out the window again. At the dark streets, at the quiet world outside, he realized that nothing would ever be the same. A chance encounter, a child in need, had entered his life without warning. And though he did not know how he would manage, he knew one thing: he could not turn away. He could not leave the child out there alone. He had a decision to make, and he had made it without hesitation. For tonight, at least, the child was safe, and he was no longer alone in the quiet apartment. The world felt different now, filled with the weight of responsibility, the possibility of love. In the first faint glimmer of hope, the night was quiet. Except for the occasional hum of a car passing on the wet streets outside, the child sat on the edge of the couch, wrapped in the blanket he had offered, eyes wide and alert. He had not said much after the small meal, just nibbled on the bread and cheese, as if afraid to ask for more. He could sense the child's hunger went beyond food. It was a hunger for comfort, for safety, for someone to notice that they mattered. He tried to create a calm environment. He moved quietly around the apartment, putting the leftover dishes in the sink, arranging the blanket neatly on the couch, and making sure the small heater was on. Each movement was slow and deliberate, almost meditative. He wanted to convey without words that everything was okay, that the child was safe here. Yet inside he felt a storm of questions and worries. Who was this child? Where had they come from? How long had they been alone? And most importantly, what would happen next? He finally sat down beside the child, careful to give them space. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to," he said softly. The child nodded slightly, staring down at their hands, fidgeting with the edges of the blanket. He remembered how he had felt as a child when adults asked questions that felt too big to answer, and he decided not to push. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the faint sound of the heater and the child's soft breathing. He offered some water, which the child accepted quietly, and he could see the relief in their eyes. The child took a small sip, then a bigger one, and finally leaned back against the couch, as if trying to absorb the sense of safety he had created. "Do you want to talk a little?" he asked gently. "You can tell me your name or where you're from, or anything at all." The child hesitated, biting their lip, and then whispered, barely audible, "I don't have anywhere to go." The words struck him like a weight. The child was telling the truth, and it was as raw and simple as it could be. He reached out carefully, placing a hand near the child's shoulder, not touching unless invited. "You're safe here tonight," he said. "We'll figure things out together." The child nodded, and for a moment, a faint smile appeared. It was tentative, fragile, but it was a beginning. They spent the rest of the evening slowly getting to know each other. He learned that the child had been wandering for days with no one to care for them. They had small belongings in a worn-out bag, a tattered notebook, a few pieces of clothing, and a small faded toy that they clutched as if it held all the comfort in the world. He could see the exhaustion and fear in their eyes, and it moved something inside him that he had not felt in years, a protective, almost instinctual care. He prepared a small sleeping area on the floor, using extra blankets and pillows. The child hesitated, unsure if it was truly okay to sleep here, but finally curled up, clutching their toy tightly. He watched them for a while, seeing the tension in their small body slowly relax. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling for him too. He realized how lonely his life had been, how routine and empty. And now there was someone who depended on him in a way that felt meaningful and urgent. He could not sleep immediately. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet breaths of the child on the floor. Thoughts raced through his mind. Tomorrow would bring questions, challenges, and responsibilities he was not prepared for. Yet, there was also a quiet hope, a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He realized that life could change in a single night, and perhaps this was a chance to create something better. Something more human, more connected. Morning came slowly. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow over the apartment. The child stirred, blinking sleepily, and for a moment they seemed unsure if it was real or just a dream. He offered a small breakfast, again simple but warm, and watched as the child ate slowly, savoring each bite. It was not much, but it was enough to start the day. And in the act of eating, the child seemed to regain a small measure of confidence. After breakfast, they sat together quietly. He suggested a walk outside to get some fresh air. The child looked hesitant but agreed. Outside, the city felt alive in a new way. The child held his hand tentatively, gripping it tightly as they walked through puddles and past morning traffic. He noticed how alert and observant the child was, how quickly they scanned their surroundings, always wary, always calculating. They stopped at a small park nearby, where the child ran a little, exploring cautiously. He watched, smiling softly, remembering how it had felt to be young and free. And he realized how much he had missed those simple joys. He tried to show patience and care, letting the child move at their own pace, never rushing, never forcing. There was a delicate balance between guidance and freedom, and he tried to navigate it with gentle attention. Returning home, he helped the child with a small task, cleaning their small bag and organizing their few belongings. It was a simple act, but it gave the child a sense of ownership and control in a world that had offered them little. He noticed small signs of trust-building, shared laughter over a minor mishap, the child asking a question about something he was doing, the small, hesitant ways they imitated his routines. Throughout the day, he also contacted a friend who worked in social services, discreetly seeking advice without revealing too much. He wanted to understand the options, the responsibilities, and the best way to ensure the child's safety without causing alarm or fear. The conversation was careful and measured, and he felt a bit of relief, knowing that help existed, even if it was distant. It was the first step in turning a difficult, unexpected night into a manageable reality. As evening approached, they prepared a simple meal together. The child helped with small tasks, chopping vegetables with guidance, stirring carefully, and laughing quietly at small mistakes. He watched the child's cautious confidence grow and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The apartment no longer felt empty. It was alive with movement, sound, and interaction. After dinner, they settled into a routine. Storytelling became a quiet ritual. He shared tales from his own childhood, careful to leave out the sad parts. And the child responded with small stories of their own experiences, truncated but full of meaning. In these exchanges, trust deepened, and the connection grew stronger. He saw resilience in the child, a spark of hope and intelligence that could flourish with guidance and care. As the night deepened, he prepared the small sleeping area again, watching the child climb into the blankets with a small sigh of contentment. He felt a sense of calm settle over him, a recognition that this unexpected encounter was reshaping his life in ways he could not have imagined. There were challenges ahead. No doubt about it, questions, legal matters, and the need for long-term planning, but for the moment, they had each other, and that was enough. He sat beside the child, listening to their soft breathing, and allowed himself to feel something he had long avoided, hope. It was tentative, fragile, but real. He understood that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that they would navigate it together. The night ended with a quiet understanding. Trust had been built, a bond had begun, one that would grow with patience, care, and shared experiences. For the first time in years, he felt that life might hold more than routine and solitude. It might hold connection, meaning, and a chance to create something new and profoundly human. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, delicate rhythm. The child began to settle into the apartment, cautiously exploring the small space as if testing boundaries, while he adjusted to having another presence in his life. It was strange at first, the sudden shift from solitude to responsibility. but something inside him had awakened a feeling of purpose that had been absent for years. Mornings started with simple routines. He would wake before the child to prepare breakfast, the aroma of warm bread and eggs filling the apartment. The child would follow him silently, peeking into cupboards or watching him cook with wide, attentive eyes. There was a mix of curiosity and hesitancy in the child, a wariness built from too many nights without safety. He noticed it and moved gently, explaining small tasks as he went, showing how to pour water or stir batter. The child repeated the movements, slow at first, then with increasing confidence, and he felt a small, deep joy at seeing that trust grow. After breakfast, they would share quiet moments together. Sometimes it was reading from a small stack of books he had kept since his own childhood. Sometimes it was drawing with crayons on sheets of paper spread across the table. The child's drawings were simple, but expressive: homes, streets, trees, and little people with large eyes. He would look at each picture, asking gentle questions, encouraging the child to tell stories about the images. The child would smile softly, sometimes whispering, sometimes speaking in full sentences, revealing pieces of their past and glimpses of their imagination. The bond between them grew stronger as he began to notice subtle signs of change. The child laughed more, though cautiously, and began to share small details of their life before coming here. They spoke of empty rooms, strangers, and nights spent on cold steps. And he listened without judgment, offering comfort instead of solutions. He had learned that the child needed someone to witness their experiences, to acknowledge their reality without trying to fix it all at once. It was a delicate balance, requiring patience, empathy, and a steady presence. He started to see the child's personality emerge in small ways: preferences for certain foods, delight in small acts of creativity, and moments of stubbornness that reminded him of his own youth. They would sit together at the kitchen table, working on puzzles or games, and he noticed how the child's focus sharpened, how confidence began to replace fear. Each day brought subtle victories, small but meaningful, and he celebrated them quietly, inwardly, with a sense of pride. There were challenges, too. The child had been through experiences that left them wary of strangers and anxious about routines. Sometimes they would become quiet and withdrawn, refusing to eat or respond to questions. At first he felt frustrated and helpless, unsure of how to break through the walls the child had built. But he remembered his own childhood, and he learned to offer calm patience instead of pressure. He would sit beside the child silently, reading aloud or humming softly, allowing the child to feel safety without demanding engagement. Gradually, the child would respond with a small smile or a whispered word, and he would feel a quiet victory inside. Evenings were their time to connect more deeply. He would prepare dinner, and the child would help in small ways, stirring, setting the table, or wiping crumbs. They began to share stories of the day, what they had observed outside, little victories, and moments that made them laugh. Sometimes the child would ask questions about his life, about the routines he followed, the jobs he worked, or the city they lived in. He answered honestly, in simple words, careful to avoid fear or overwhelm, allowing the child to see that life could be challenging, but also manageable and sometimes joyful. Outside of the apartment, he started to explore the city with the child. Walks to the nearby park became a ritual, where the child would run, climb, and explore while he watched carefully. He taught small skills along the way: how to cross streets safely, how to observe people and places, and how to notice small details in the world. The child learned quickly, absorbing the knowledge without realizing it, growing more independent and confident with each outing. The city, once overwhelming and impersonal, began to feel more familiar and alive for both of them. He also began to make small connections with people who could offer guidance. A neighbor, noticing the child's presence, smiled warmly instead of questioning or judging. A coworker offered quiet advice on childcare, suggesting local resources without prying. These small gestures gave him reassurance that he was not alone in navigating this new responsibility. He began to see that a community existed, even if distant or unnoticed before, ready to offer support when needed. Sleep was a different challenge. The child still woke occasionally, crying or calling softly, and he would go to them, calming them, checking for nightmares or fears. He learned to respond with patience and consistency, creating a safe environment where the child could rest and feel secure. Over time, the nighttime fears diminished, replaced by a sense of safety and predictability that had been missing from the child's life for so long. Through all of this, he experienced his own transformation. He realized that life was no longer about mere survival, about juggling routines and responsibilities alone. It was about connection, about the deep satisfaction that comes from being needed and trusted. He found joy in the child's laughter, pride in their accomplishments, and warmth in the quiet moments they shared. The apartment, once silent and empty, became a home filled with life, movement, and hope. He also reflected on the past and what had brought them together. Chance encounters, a quiet night, a moment of compassion, these small acts had led to a profound shift in his life. He understood that life's unpredictability could bring hardship. Yes, but also opportunity for growth, connection, and unexpected joy. The child had opened a door in his heart he had long thought sealed, allowing him to experience care, love, and responsibility in ways he had never imagined. As the days turned into weeks, routines solidified. Breakfast, school preparation, walks, meals, play, and quiet evenings became their rhythm. They communicated more openly, the child gaining confidence and sharing thoughts and feelings, and he in turn learning patience, empathy, and the subtle art of guidance. They began to plan small projects together, gardening in a tiny balcony, creating drawings to decorate the apartment, or simple baking exercises to build skills and share experiences. Each project, no matter how small, strengthened their bond. He also noticed the child's resilience. Despite the hardship and fear in their past, they displayed courage, curiosity, and intelligence. They asked questions, tried new things, and responded to challenges with determination. He felt awe and respect for the child, and the admiration was mutual. As the child began to see him, not only as a caregiver, but as a companion and guide in navigating a world that had often been harsh and unforgiving. Conflict. However, it was never far away. At times, he worried about what would happen if someone discovered the child's presence. Questions about authorities, legal obligations, and social services loomed over him. He also worried about the child's emotional state, aware that trust was fragile and could be disrupted easily. He tried to balance vigilance with nurturing, protection with freedom, guidance with independence. It was a delicate dance, requiring intuition, attention, and heart. Yet through the challenges, the bonds strengthened. They began to share secrets, hopes, and small dreams. The child whispered wishes for a home, for friends, for a life without fear. And he listened, promising in small ways through actions and words that they could create a future together. He taught them about resilience, problem-solving, and the importance of hope. The child taught him about joy, curiosity, and the power of simple moments. Evenings ended with the child tucked safely into bed, holding their small toy, a symbol of comfort and continuity. He would sit nearby, reading or reflecting quietly, aware of the transformation happening within both of them. He realized that love was not always dramatic or sudden. It could be quiet, patient, and steady, growing in small acts of care and trust. This was the essence of family, he understood. A bond created not only by blood but by shared experiences, trust, and unwavering presence. By the end of the third week, a new rhythm had been established. They had routines, rituals, and a growing sense of belonging. He had come to understand the depth of responsibility he had taken on, but also the profound rewards it offered. He could see the child's confidence growing, their laughter more frequent, and their trust deeper. And he could see himself changing as well, learning to love without hesitation, to guide without controlling, and to hope without fear. This period of adjustment and bonding laid the foundation for the challenges yet to come. The world outside the apartment remained unpredictable, and decisions would have to be made about the child's future. But for now, they lived in a fragile bubble of trust, care, and emerging connection, learning from each other and discovering that life could indeed be better than mere survival. In the quiet, in the small routines, in the shared laughter and stories, they were building something lasting, a bond that would sustain them both. through uncertainty and the promise of a future filled with love, hope, and shared life. The weeks passed quietly, each day blending into the next, until reality began to intrude in ways he had not fully anticipated. While the apartment had become a haven for the child, the world outside was not always kind, and the complexities of their situation were starting to show. He had grown confident in their routines, in the quiet joy of shared meals, laughter, and stories. But the responsibilities weighed heavier each day, pressing against the fragile bubble of safety they had built together. One morning, as he prepared breakfast, he noticed the child staring out of the window, eyes wide with unease. He approached gently. "What is it?" he asked softly. The child hesitated, then whispered, "Some people are watching." He looked toward the street and saw neighbors peering from behind curtains, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion in their eyes. The feeling of being observed was foreign to the child, who had grown used to moving in shadows and avoiding attention. Now, under the gaze of others, they shrank slightly. Seeking reassurance, he knelt beside the child, taking their small hand in his. "It's okay. We're safe here. No one can hurt us," he said, though the words felt heavier than usual. The child nodded, but he could see the tension lingering. Outside, the world continued its daily rhythm, oblivious to the challenges that had entered this small apartment. It wasn't long before external pressures began to intensify. A neighbor, concerned about the child's presence, contacted local authorities. While their intentions were not malicious, it created an immediate sense of urgency and fear. He had to act quickly to ensure the child's safety while navigating the legal and emotional complexities that came with caring for someone who was not his own legally. The idea of social services, paperwork, and scrutiny felt overwhelming, but he knew he could not turn back. The child depended on him, and retreat was not an option. He reached out to a friend who worked in child advocacy, someone he trusted to provide guidance without judgment. Together, they discussed options, resources, and the steps necessary to secure the child's safety and well-being. The conversations were sobering, filled with reminders of the responsibilities and potential challenges ahead, but they also offered a path forward. Knowledge became a shield, giving him a sense of direction in a situation that had once felt chaotic and unpredictable. The child, meanwhile, began to sense the tension in the apartment. They had grown accustomed to quiet, predictable days, and the sudden appearance of worry in his actions did not go unnoticed. The child asked questions, small probing questions about authorities, about whether they would be separated, about what would happen if someone found out. He answered carefully in simple words, reassuring without overpromising, and tried to maintain a calm demeanor. He knew the child needed stability now more than ever, and panic or fear would only deepen old wounds. School became another challenge. The child had been out of regular schooling for some time, and integrating them into a classroom environment was daunting. He accompanied the child to the local school, meeting with teachers and counselors to explain the situation as best he could. Some adults were understanding and supportive, offering resources and flexible arrangements, while others were cautious, emphasizing rules and procedures that reminded him of the bureaucratic hurdles they would face. The child watched him closely, sensing the importance of these interactions, and he tried to model confidence and reassurance even when he felt uncertain. At home, they worked on maintaining routines that provided comfort and security. Meals, quiet reading, walks, and small projects continued. But the backdrop of potential change and scrutiny added a layer of tension that had not been there before. He noticed the child's increased vigilance, the way they would pause mid-activity, listening, checking doors or windows, as if expecting the world to intrude on their safety. He gently reminded them that they were protected, but he could not erase the child's experiences or the memory of past hardships. Despite these challenges, moments of joy and connection persisted. He found small ways to celebrate victories, finishing a drawing, trying a new skill, or simply laughing together at a shared joke. These moments became vital, lifelines that reminded them both that life was not only about challenges, but also about connection, growth, and hope. He discovered that resilience was not only in enduring hardship, but in finding light. Even in uncertain times, he also began to reflect on his own transformation. The presence of the child had forced him to confront fears and insecurities he had long avoided. He was learning patience, empathy, and the courage to act decisively in the face of uncertainty. He realized that caring for another human being required not only practical solutions, but also emotional investment, a willingness to be vulnerable, and the humility to admit mistakes and learn from them. In return, the child was learning trust, communication, and the simple joys of a stable environment. As the days continued, he recognized the importance of small, consistent actions, checking in with the child's emotional state, maintaining routines, preparing meals together, and creating a safe space became acts of stability that countered the external pressures they faced. He also learned to seek support without feeling weak, understanding that community and guidance were essential tools in navigating complex situations. The child, growing more confident and secure, began to engage more fully in daily life. They asked questions about the world, shared stories of their imagination, and began to develop friendships within the community and at school. These developments were milestones, marking the slow but steady building of trust and resilience. Each small achievement reinforced the bond between them and provided him with hope that they could navigate the challenges. Ahead together, conflict continued to emerge. However, reminding him that their situation remained precarious, he faced moments of doubt, questioning whether he was doing enough, whether he was prepared to handle what might come next. The legal system, concerned neighbors, and societal expectations added layers of complexity that could not be ignored. Yet through these challenges, he remained committed, driven by a deep sense of responsibility and the growing love he felt for the child. Evenings were now times of reflection and quiet connection. After the day's challenges, they would sit together, sharing stories, playing small games, or simply enjoying the presence of one another. He could see the child's trust deepening, evidenced in the way they would approach him for comfort, advice, or simply companionship. These moments were precious, anchors in a world that often felt uncertain and unforgiving. He also began to consider the long-term future. Temporary solutions were no longer sufficient. He explored the possibilities of guardianship, formal adoption, and other avenues that could provide legal and emotional security for the child. Each option required careful planning, patience, and resilience. And he approached these considerations with the same quiet determination that had guided him through the early days of their encounter. Through the challenges, discovered the strength of their bond. The child's laughter, curiosity, and resilience became sources of motivation and joy. Each obstacle they faced together reinforced the connection, creating a foundation of trust and care that could withstand external pressures. He understood that family was not merely a legal definition, but a commitment, a shared journey, and a promise of presence and support. By the end of the 4th week, he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had navigated fear, uncertainty, and the scrutiny of others, emerging with a stronger bond and a clearer path forward. The apartment remained a haven, the routines provided stability, and the child's trust continued to grow. He had learned to balance vigilance with care, authority with empathy, and planning with adaptability. The lessons were difficult, but essential, shaping him into a caregiver who could face challenges with courage and compassion. He knew the journey was far from over. The world outside continued to demand attention, and the child's future required ongoing thought, planning, and action. Yet for the first time, he felt equipped to meet these challenges, bolstered by the bond they had built and the understanding that love, patience, and commitment could provide stability in even the most uncertain circumstances. As night fell and the child slept peacefully, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection and gratitude, knowing that while the road ahead would be difficult, they would face it together, strengthened by the resilience, trust, and connection that had grown from a single, unexpected encounter. The morning sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow over the apartment. The child stirred, stretching and blinking sleepily. He watched quietly from the kitchen, preparing breakfast with careful attention to details, making sure there was enough for both of them. The rhythm of their lives had become familiar. Yet every day brought the reminder that this life was built on careful choices, courage, and trust. As the child came into the kitchen, Rubbing their eyes, he smiled and offered a plate. The child took it gratefully, still shy, but slowly growing confident in the simple acts of routine. They ate quietly at first, savoring the food, then gradually conversation returned. The child told him about a dream they had during the night, a dream that involved running through wide-open spaces and feeling free. He listened, intrigued, and asked gentle questions, encouraging the child to explore feelings and thoughts. Reinforcing the sense that their voice mattered and was heard, the weeks and months that followed brought more stability. They navigated the formalities of social services, guardianship discussions, and school integration with care and patience. He learned the importance of advocacy, persistence, and emotional reassurance. Meetings, paperwork, and phone calls became part of the routine. Yet they never overshadowed the growing bond between him and the child. Each challenge was met together, decisions made in partnership, always prioritizing the child's sense of safety and trust. Outside their small apartment, life began to feel more vibrant. The child made friends at school, participated in simple activities, and began to explore their interests more freely. He encouraged these experiences, attending parent-teacher meetings, volunteering for school events, and supporting the child's endeavors. He discovered that love was shown not only in protection and provision, but in presence, attention, and encouragement. Each smile, each shared achievement, and each small adventure strengthened the connection that had begun so unexpectedly. At home, routines became anchors of security. Meals were shared with laughter and conversation. Small projects, gardening, drawing, cooking became rituals that filled the apartment with life. Storytelling remained a quiet joy, where they could share experiences, dreams, and fears, each word building trust and understanding. Nights ended with gentle goodnights, the child's small hand resting in his, a simple yet profound symbol of the bond they had created. He watched the child grow, not just in physical strength, but in confidence, resilience, and joy. The child learned to express feelings, solve small problems, and approach life with curiosity and courage. He marveled at their resilience, remembering the fear and hunger that had first brought them together. Now, each day reflected growth, trust, and the quiet triumph of love and care over adversity. The community around them began to recognize the change as well. Neighbors who had once been wary offered smiles and small gestures of support. Teachers and friends provided encouragement, sharing in the child's achievements and milestones. These external validations were not the primary reward, but they reinforced the sense that their life, once fragile and uncertain, was becoming secure and accepted in the wider world. Despite the progress, he remained vigilant. Life could still challenge them in unexpected ways. He understood the importance of preparation, responsibility, and proactive care. He balanced this vigilance with celebration, allowing them to enjoy the simple pleasures of childhood, playground visits, small treats, quiet walks, and shared laughter. Each moment became precious, building block of memory and trust. The day came when legal confirmation allowed the child to remain with him officially. The paperwork, signatures, and meetings culminated in a sense of closure and accomplishment. It was not merely a formality, but a recognition of their bond, a formal acknowledgement of the life they had built together. He felt a quiet pride, not in the legal victory, but in the resilience, love, and patience that had made it possible.